ni ikiganiro kiza kugirwamo uruhare n'abaminisitiri babishinzwe by'umwihariko wabo mu rwego rw'ikoranabuhanga n'iterambere hano ku mugabane wa Afurika, barimo na Minisitiri w'ikoranabuhanga na innovation hano mu Rwanda, Minisita Ingabire Paula, uri butange ikiganiro kandi kiraza no kugirwamo uruhare n'umuyobozi mukuru w'ikigo mpuzamahanga cya nucleaire ndetse na atomic hano ku isi, Raphael Gross, nawe uza kugira icyo agaragaza nk'ingamba ndetse na bimwe mu bigomba gushyirwa kwibanze rya byose muri imikoreshereze ya nucleaire. Ni ikiganiro mugiye gukurikira hano kuri televiziyo Rwanda ndetse n'imbuga nkoranyambaga zayo.
Prime Ministers of Niger and Rwanda, and Mr. Raphael Mariano Grossi, Director General of the International Atomic Energy Agency. Your presence underscores how serious and significant this summit is for Africa's future and for global energy security, as well as for sustainable development. My name is Jackie Lumbasi. It is an honor to be your MC. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, we will now watch a message from Daniel B. Pohnman, Fellow of the Atlantic Council's Global Energy Center and Fellow of the Council's Scowcroft Center for Strategy and Security.
Greetings. I am Daniel Pohnman, distinguished person, but honored to have a few moments to share a few thoughts with you on this important work in this important conference. First, President Kagame and Prime Minister Ngirente for hosting this important gathering. Commend the energy ministers and the leaders of financial institutions who have joined, as well as the industry and non-governmental experts all here today. The significance of this meeting for our industry is attested by the presence of Director General of the International Atomic Energy Agency, Raphael Grossi, President Sama Bilbao-Leon of the World Nuclear Association, and the representative of Director Bill Magwood of the Nuclear Energy Agency in Paris. We stand at a pivotal moment in the history of this continent and indeed of the world, a moment of limitless possibilities, but also limitless dangers. By 2050, global population will be nearly 10 billion people, and Africa is the only continent whose population will represent a greater share of global population in 2050 than it does today. Africa has enormous potential. The land is endowed with prodigious resources and a rich variety of cultures and talented and resourceful people. Yet poverty, absolute poverty and energy poverty, remain a serious challenge. 600 million Africans still lack access to reliable electricity. For most of Africa, average per capita electricity consumption ranges from 150 to 180 kilowatt hours, compared to 6,500 kilowatt hours in Europe and 13,000 kilowatt hours in the United States. So Africa will be a major engine of economic growth in the decades ahead. Africa will need abundant, reliable, affordable, clean energy. And as Bill Gates has said, nuclear is the only form of energy that operates day in and day out, season in and season out, virtually anywhere in the world that has been proven to work at large scale. Nuclear is the densest form of energy. One uranium fuel pellet holds as much energy as 149 gallons of oil, or 17,000 cubic feet of natural gas, or a ton of coal. That's why nuclear imposes the least burden on land use. A 1,000 megawatt nuclear plant needs about as much land as is in the walled city of Rabat, Morocco. Meanwhile, a 1,000 megawatt solar farm would cover most of the Volcanoes National Park right here in Rwanda, which I had the pleasure of visiting for a life-changing experience, seeing the mountain gorillas in their natural habitat. 1,000 megawatts of wind power would cover half of the Masai Mara. And nuclear does not disrupt delicate water ecosystems, unlike big hydroelectric dams. For all these reasons, nuclear energy is an ideal energy form if you care about preserving this world's rich and precious biodiversity. So what is to be done? For Africa to support a successful nuclear program, it is essential to develop the human talent base to understand that technology, how to build it, how to operate it safely and effectively, and how to develop and apply a first-class regulatory system to assure its safety and public confidence. There is useful precedent on how to build a program from scratch, or literally out of sand. Witness the United Arab Emirates, an incredible success story. They did it right. They developed a policy, passed legislation, brought in world-class experts, trained their own workforce, and in a few years built a successful program adhering to the highest international standards of safety, security, and non-proliferation. That can happen here in Africa. Everyone has a role to play. Philanthropy for training and development, concessionary aid for feasibility studies, government training programs and investment, including through export credit programs. Fortunately, under the leadership of President Ajay Banga, working closely with Director General Grossi, the World Bank has reversed its long-standing opposition to supporting nuclear projects. I had the privilege of discussing this exciting decision with President Banga just a few days ago in New York. Multilateral developments can now play an important role in helping nuclear projects get underway in Africa. If governments de-risk investments through their resources and policy regimes, then private debt and equity will be reassured. President Eisenhower articulated a vision in 1953 that remains valid today, in which the power of fission is harnessed to assist humanity in meeting its energy, agricultural, and medical needs. Now we need a new generation to revive that vision and put it into practice. It has been done before, and working together, the people gathered here at this conference and their colleagues and partners can do it again. The stakes could not be higher. The urgency could not be greater. The benefits to Africa and beyond call upon everyone here to exert their best efforts and go from this place to engage their respective stakeholders in this exciting moment for all. Thank you, and best wishes for a successful conference.
Daniel Paulman, ladies and gentlemen. And now it is my honor to invite the chairman, Rwanda Atomic Energy Board, Dr. Lassina Zabo, for his remarks.
Not to remark, I think I'm just taking the stage to welcome my dear friend, Rafael Mariano Grossi, Director General of the International Atomic Energy Agency. Rafael and I come a long way. And Rafael, I wanted to tell you how grateful I am personally and how grateful the government of Rwanda is that despite your busy schedule, and we've been talking again yesterday, how difficult it was. You made it, and we all thank you. You joining here His Excellency, the Prime Minister of Rwanda, His Excellency, the Prime Minister of Niger, and many ministers from across Africa. And Rafael, I just have one word. In my part of the world, they say, meaning you've honored us, but we're asking God to honor you. And that's all what we can say today. So thank you for coming. You've been in contact regularly with myself. We've done Ponman with Sama Bilbao, because you all believe in nuclear energy for the continent. And I know, and I said it yesterday, you will dwell into what you've been doing for the continent since taking over. And that's what we expect of you, and that's what Rwanda expects of you. And we want you to do what you've been doing for Africa, so that in Rwanda, what we say for the nuclear energy program, Rwanda becomes a blueprint where something can be successful, the fastest, the smoothest for the continent. Rafael took me in 2014 to Argentina. He doesn't talk about that because he's now the Director General of the agency, to visit Argentina nuclear program and INVAP that was at the time building already SMRs. And the ambition was to build SMRs for the developing world. They wanted to make it safer, flexible, and easily deployable for the continent, and also cheaper. That was the ambition of Argentina at the time. As Rafael mentioned to me this morning, they've gone further. They've done it with the innovation that goes with the recent small modular reactors. And he cannot talk about it, but I can, because we visited Bariloche together. But as we say in French, joindre l'utile à l'agréable, he also took me to a football match. The only difficulty was that he was with one team and I'm with Boca Juniors since my childhood. And Rafael was mentioning now, when I went to the stadium, they confused me with an African who was playing in the early 80s. And then I became suddenly famous and everybody wanted an autograph of me. So I took the autograph for long, and then I end up saying, I'm not Alphonse Chami, I'm just Lassina Zerbo. So Rafael, you're here today. Let's welcome the Director General of the International Atomic Energy Agency for his remark. Rafael, merci.
Thank you very much. Good morning, Prime Minister, of course, of Niger, dear ministers, and of course, my old and good friend, Lassina. Thank you for those kind words. And let me congratulate you and all those who have been participating in this great effort, which is NEISA, which is this Nuclear Energy Innovation Summit for Africa here in Kigali. The introductory remarks that you heard from Mr. Poneman laid out a number of points which I am sure are going to be developed in the course of the day. Why nuclear? Why nuclear now? What are the advantages? What are the challenges that we are having? From the perspective of the IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency, the added value that we want to bring to this discussion is to be the real enablers of many of the things that are going to happen and are already happening here in Africa. There is a global trend, and I think it's been mentioned already, but I would like to stop for a minute there and elaborate on that. There is a global trend which is caused by a number of factors, ranging from climate change, to economic development, to the new debates about energy security. We were never referring to something as energy security and in the past, but in an unfortunately increasingly fragmented world, countries are looking for solutions that will provide predictability, that will provide the elements for growth that we all need and we all aspire, and in particular here in Africa. And there is no reason why Africa should not be part of this trend that is picking up in the world. At the conference of the parties of the Climate Change Convention in Dubai 2 years ago, there was what I would define as a watershed moment when all countries realized that we all need nuclear. It doesn't mean that every country is going to have nuclear, but it simply means that we are not going to move into a global economy which is gradually decarbonized and is efficient without the contribution of nuclear energy. And technology, because at the end of the day, this is an activity that is technology-driven, technology is providing us with solutions. Technology is providing us with new alternatives that heretofore we did not have. And this is why there is so much anticipation, there is so much excitement in the world and in particular in Africa through the emergence of technologies like small modular reactors. And of course, traditional nuclear as well, and micro reactors. All of these technologies that, of course, have the advantage of the mobility, the flexibility, as it is known, and of course, the affordability, why not say it, at the end of the day, it is also about the feasibility of something, the ability of your countries everybody to pay for this. It is important to see that we have this incredible alternative. The contribution of the IEA is not the advocacy as well, but there are many that are going to be developing this. What you need is infrastructure. What you need is capacity building, the ability to train your experts, the ability to have them and to be up to speed to host these nuclear reactors in time and in the best possible way. And of course, very, very importantly, the safety and the security of these operations. Many people, and it will happen to you when you go into the concrete phases of developing your own national programs, there will be questions about the safety, there are issues about the images of past accidents and so on and so forth. So this is why it is so important and why we are here with you and will be here with you hand in hand, accompanying Africa in its journey into nuclear energy, so that everything that happens has a very strong regulatory ingredient, without which this activity would be extremely difficult to bring to fruition. So this is why we see this activity, and the IAEA is working with many of your countries. Of course, Rwanda is a case in point. My dear Edouard, Prime Minister, we have been talking about this, of course, with Lassina. I'm going to be discussing this later with the President, and we have been doing this, of course, in Niger, but also in Algeria, in Morocco, in Tunisia, in Egypt, which is building its first set of big nuclear power plants, which is going to start to be operational in a couple of years. But we talk also about Sudan. We talk also about Congo, DRC Congo. We talk about, of course, Namibia, South Africa, which has, or until today, is the only country in the continent that has a nuclear energy program and has finally decided to increase its capacity. So whenever I look at Ghana, Senegal, Kenya, in all of these countries, the IEA is already preparing the workforce, is already working with the regulators. And importantly, there is this issue of the financing, which Lassina mentioned just now, and also I think in the words of Mr. Poneman. For many, many years, financing in nuclear was out of the question for a variety of reasons, none of which was, in our opinion, neither scientifically nor technically justifiable. But the reality was that there was a limitation, a restriction. So countries could not turn to international finance institutions, and this is, I think, so essential for developing nations, like here in Africa, or where I come from, in Latin America and the Caribbean, or in some parts, in vast parts of Asia. So it was about a singular relationship between vendor and countries that have, as we all know, so many competing priorities in terms of economy and health and education and so many other things. So this is why what happened in Paris just a few days ago is so historical. And I'm not mincing my words here. It's historical because for the first time, the mother of all the development banks, which is the World Bank, decided to put a stop to this. And after a long work of preparation, understanding, mutual education, I would say, between our experts and those from the World Bank, we signed an agreement which, in my opinion, not only is going to allow you to turn to the World Bank, but also, and very importantly, and this is the next step, we are going to be working with regional development banks. There is no reason why, when the World Bank has said goodbye to the old resistance and reluctances of the past, that the African Development Bank, the Inter-American Development Bank, the Asian Development Bank, the Islamic Development Bank, with whom we have been working, do not also open their doors to those of you who are going to be investing in nuclear in the next few years. The road, of course, will have to be populated with concrete things, concrete activities that we are going to be carrying out together with you. This is why the IAEA is there. The IAEA is, and it's the first thing in the statute I swore upon when I became Director General, is to promote the peaceful uses of nuclear energy. So this is why, in spite of all these difficulties that we are having, in spite of all the tensions that we see in the world, the wars that may exist, the conflicts that they exist are elsewhere in the world are not solving a single one of the problems you have here in Africa. And on the contrary, perhaps they are aggravating it. So this is why we have to be here. I had to be here working with you. And for those who have not started their partnership with the IAEA, we are here for that. Our teams are here for that. And for those who have already started, be assured that we will be with you every step of the way, because there is no reason that Africa does not benefit from this, which is also helping and fueling the growth of the economies all over the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Director General Rafael Mariano Grossi. We appreciate your support for NESA, your commitment and message of optimism. Now, as Africa charts its path towards sustainable development, leadership in clean energy and technological innovation will be at the heart of the continent's transformation. We're now going into a high-level session to discuss Africa's innovation advantage, designing a future powered by technology and clean energy. It is a pleasure for me to invite our remarkable panelists for this discussion. I will start off with the moderator, Francesca Giovanni, Executive Director, Harvard Belfer Center Initiative of Managing the Atom. Good to see you again, Francesca. She'll be joined by Honorable Paula Ingabire, Minister for ICT and Innovation, Rwanda. Honorable Sina Lawson, Minister of Digital Economy and Digital Transformation, Togo. Mansour Hamayoun, Co-founder and Chairman, Minex.
Thank you very much. And especially I want to thank my former boss and my role model, Dr. Lassina Zerbo, for inviting me to Rwanda. It's been a real fantastic experience, and again, a great honor to moderate also this panel today. I wanted just to put into perspective this panel by just giving you a sense of how relevant Africa will be, not only for itself, but for the entire international community moving forward. By 2050, there will be roughly 9.5 billion people on Earth, and 25% of them will live in Africa. And by the end of this century, 40% of the whole population in the world will live in Africa. This means that challenges like sustainable development, technological innovation, digital transformation will have to find critical solutions here, and will actually have then a spearheading role around the world. So when we talk about the African energy revolution, we are not only talking about this regional revolution, but we are talking about a global revolution as a whole. So it is extraordinarily important for everyone beyond Africa to understand what is going on here, and to understand how African leaders think about innovation, tackling the challenges that they confront. So I wanted to start with you, Minister Ingabire. You are the Minister of ICT and Innovation of our host country, Rwanda, and you have thought a lot about innovation. Director General Grossi reminded us that investing in the future means also tackling competing priorities: development, energy security, technology. You have worked on innovation, and I wanted to ask you if you can reflect a little bit about what innovation means to you and some examples of where you have been the most successful in innovating in Rwanda, especially in relation to energy financing, for example.
Thank you very much, Francesca, and good morning to everyone. Starting off with the question, in as much as we think about energy security, innovation, and many other things as competing, you can also look at them also as complementary, and it depends on how you choose to tackle and address some of these. When you look at innovations and what is really fueling the technological landscape today globally, you're seeing artificial intelligence. And at the heart of artificial intelligence is the need for massive data sets, is the need for sufficient and reliable energy. You just gave us some good statistics around what population growth is going to look like in a couple of years. But when you also look at what the current electrification gap looks like and the current gap when it comes to financing energy, you start to see an opportunity where, as we make sure that we're thinking about the future, which is going to be heavily disrupted or modeled with digital technologies and innovations, how then do we use that as a catalyst or as a catalyst for the kind of investments that we need to make? And this is where we see almost like the beautiful fusion or cohesion of both AI and energy and nuclear, particularly as we think about clean energy solutions that are going to power some of these innovations. Now, back to your question, for Rwanda, it's been a deliberate choice for us and decision to make sure that we put technology and innovations center and front of what we're doing as a government. And that enables us, one, to stay competitive, but two, to also make sure that we're leveraging digital technologies in a way that will allow us to grow in different aspects of society. We've also been a country over the last couple of years, because we started in 2000, really with this very deliberate strategy where we're leveraging digital technologies to drive public service delivery. Today, we are thinking about how we use data to inform both the policies that we are making as a government, but also data to inform some of the implementation and the work that we're doing. And data remains very core to some of the conversations that we're having here today, because you need data to model and predict what the demand is going to look like. You need data to give the certainty that the demand is there and for the investments to happen. You need data when you're thinking about de-risking some of these investments. And so we continue to put emphasis as a government in terms of how do we become a proof of concept country where we can test and try many solutions that are digital, even non-digital solutions, as long as they are creating value and transforming the society as a whole.
Thank you very much. I want to build on precisely the point the Minister was making about the importance of data and asking you, Minister Lawson, you have led digital transformation in Togo for over 10 years. Togo has been recognized with Rwanda as one of the most innovative when it comes to thinking about digital platforms. Can you give us a sense of how much the rise of data centers, AI research, is really driving energy needs in your country and maybe in the continent, and how much does this really increase the need for energy security?
Good morning, everyone. It's a real pleasure for me to be here and to actually return to Rwanda. Last time I was here, it was for the AI Summit, and it's very relevant to the conversation that we have today. First of all, as our countries become more and more digitized, we need data centers. 10 years ago, when Togo did not have a national data center, and when we built the business model, even for us to have one, we found out that we needed, as a state, to subsidize the construction of this data center, because most experts would tell us that it wasn't really needed at that point. But we took it upon ourselves to say, you know what, we think it's very important for us to have it, and it's a build and they will come situation, so let's just fund this effort. And we were actually fortunate that we approached the World Bank and say, that we wanted to work with them to have a bit of funding to invest in this new data center. And fast forward today, it's an infrastructure that not only the state uses, but the private sector, et cetera, et cetera. And moving forward and thinking of all the projects that we're working towards, having, for example, in the health sector, a health information center to implement AI within government. These data centers, because now we have more than one, are proving very critical. But then when you think that data centers are critical, then the next question is, how do you power them? The cost of electricity is extremely, is a very large part of the cost of running these data centers. And a lot of discussions that we have moving, thinking of the future was we need to secure reliable, very cheap energy source. And so that's how myself, as the Minister of Digital Transformation, I entered the conversations with regards to nuclear, because yes, we are doing, I think we are the second largest producer of solar energy in sub-Saharan Africa with Amea Power. So we've been looking into renewables and other energy sources, but if we think of becoming relevant as a country, as a region, as a continent with regards to digital transformation and AI, we absolutely need to invest in nuclear power and nuclear power generation. So that's one aspect of it. And then the second aspect of it is, as a country, how do you fund such an effort? So the financing aspect was one of extremely critical. When we started the conversation with Dr. Zerbo a few years ago, it was all about how to be able to fund this effort, and whether international organizations such as the World Bank and others would understand the importance of it. So it's a very recent, the recent change of heart of the World Bank is going to be of great support for what we're trying to do.
Fantastic. Mansour, I come to you. You are a business person. You have invested in many domains. And it seems to me that Africa is undergoing an extraordinary digital revolution, and it might be at the cusp of an energy revolution. But we are also talking about industrialization and the need to maintain also industries. Can you help us think through this? How do you see this revolution going on, and what do you think Africa needs to do really, and in what way they can accelerate, in fact, nuclear investments?
No, thank you so much. I think there's a few things to start with. I spent my first part of my life providing electricity to the rural poor, people that don't have any access using kerosene, candles, etc. And through innovation, many thanks to both ministers sitting here, the spread of mobile money, telecom, etc., what the magic that happened was that people were able to pay payments with their phones. And we installed solar systems and batteries in people's households, so when they pay small amounts of money, the system turns on. When they don't pay, the system turns off. And that sort of pay-as-you-go system became extremely successful. In Rwanda, for example, 20% of all households use our system. In Togo, 10% of all households use our system. But there's a limitation to that story, which is that it is a great solution to provide comfort at the household level for people to live a decent and acceptable life. But what it doesn't allow is the industrialization of the country. And when we start talking about industrialization, the real challenge becomes access to energy, cheap energy, abundant energy, etc. And large part of my life I've spent raising capital from outside and putting that capital back into the African system. We have deployed more than $500 million of capital in 10 countries over the last 10 years. But the real source of capital is beneath the ground in Africa to begin with. All the mineral resources that are here, the agricultural resources that are here, but the value capture doesn't really happen because the access to abundant, cheap energy is not possible. And I'll tell you my best-kept secret, which is that Africa is actually the most innovative continent on Earth. Innovation happens here first, and the rest of the world absorbs. And that's true. I mean, both ministers here on stage I'm very grateful to, because the telecom revolution itself is a great example of it. The first place where two phones could make a payment to each other at scale was Kenya, as an example. So the fact that we're having this conversation about nuclear here today, and the innovation that needs to take place, both technically, policy-wise, financial innovation, I am certain that Africa can not just be the customer of such solution, but a driving force of such thing taking place. So the industrialization element is critical. And maybe one last thing is that in Europe, we talk about deindustrialization, or the growing deindustrialization of Europe. The exciting thing about Africa is that exactly the opposite conversation. It's about how do we build more factories, do more processing, more things, and the demand for energy is going to grow tremendously, and that's where nuclear should fit rightly into that equation.
Fantastic, thank you. That's really an interesting perspective. I wanted to go to you, Mr. Ngambire, and I wanted to ask you your perspective about regional cooperation. Director General Grossi was reminding us that if you want to invest in nuclear energy, you need infrastructures, you need certain expertise in the labor force, you need a safety and security culture, all things, of course, the milestone and the DIA has produced in order to help countries on their nuclear journey. I wanted to ask you, from your experience, where do you see the greatest value for regional cooperation? So how can regional cooperation be strengthened so that individual African countries can in fact achieve these milestones?
I think a starting point is when you think about regional cooperation, on the policy side, you're looking at what kind of policies and regulations do we need to harmonize, but also because we're talking about a capital-intensive industry, it's also understanding if we're going to de-risk investments, if we're going to be an attractive block for some of these investments, what is needed to be in place so that scale is possible across the continent. Many of the investors that are going to be building some of the small and modular reactors are going to look for scale. And what does scale look like from one country to another? Are there policies that we need to be thinking about in terms of harmonization? Do we need to think collectively about what demand is going to look like? Because even as you think, maybe just to pivot a little bit, when you look at the current financing gap, we're talking about annually about 30 billion. Now, when you think about it at a country perspective and the amount of investments that are needed to invest in some of these SMRs, this is where the need for regional cooperation comes in, because you're able to pull in some of the much needed resources as you attract the investments to come in. Earlier we were talking about where we see the intersection of nuclear, AI, and all of these innovations. And just to give an example, think about the Google searches that we do on a daily basis. For each Google search, you at least need about 0.003 kilowatts of energy. But as you think about ChatGPT, which is now becoming mainstream everyday tool that everyone is using, you need 10 times that capacity. And you may think it's too little or small, but when we think about the scale, which is where we're now thinking about the regional angle, today you have over 3.5 billion Google searches that are happening on a daily basis. This is not annual. So it means in terms of energy demand, you're looking at about at least more than 1 gigawatt of energy that is needed daily to power these Google searches. When it comes to ChatGPT, which needs more than 10 times that capacity, you have over 200 million of such prompts happening on a daily basis. And that will mean that you need at least 300 gigawatts of energy. So thinking about all of that comes the question where, as different countries, we're thinking about deploying AI solutions, we're thinking about the compute infrastructure that Minister Sina talked about that is required to power some of these ambitions that we're looking for. I think the financing question then comes into play on how do we then, and there's always been conversations, especially in the tech side, where the thinking for, there's two schools of thought. One school of thought is around, let's just have regional hubs and the rest of you can get compute infrastructure from the regional hubs. But it's a question of sovereignty. Every country would like to build this capacity for itself. And so when we come together as a regional bloc, we're able to look at what is this demand going to look like, and if we're going to jointly mobilize financing for this and build these technologies and build the capacity and the policies that are needed to support this kind of investment, then you're better off doing it, as a whole, as opposed to individually trying to tackle the same challenges that we're all facing.
Thank you. Very interesting, the tension between regional cooperation but also national sovereignty, which remains really important. Minister Lawson, I wanted to continue a conversation you and I had yesterday about the digital revolution in Africa, the shortage of labor force. And I wanted to ask your view about government support innovation. There is, I think, a Western idea that innovation comes from the private sector and the government, in a way, implements most of the innovation. But I know you have been a big champion of government-led innovation. Can you give us a sense of how do you think the government can play a real role in this energy transition?
So the conversation we had yesterday was a bit of a history of electricity, of the rise of electricity in the West, which was in which, and I really believe that electricity was made possible in the West because it served to power industries. Whereas in our continent, when we look at electricity, most of the time people will talk to you about powering households. And so the rise of electricity, the funding of electricity, which has historically been linked to funding industries, having off-takers, is, becomes an issue on a continent where you don't have enough industries. And so one way to look at all these conversations is what kind of industries do we need to grow on the continent in our countries so that we have enough revenues to fund anything else and so that infrastructure can then be supporting these industries. And so it was more this conversation, which is how do we make sure that what we do is relevant and we're really following the natural path of things where you have natural resources that you transform to build industries, and then these industries provide the business case for funding infrastructure, and power being one infrastructure. And if we think in those terms, then it's no longer a matter of funding electricity, it's about understanding the system in which this energy is going to be relevant. And so when this conversation is a very important one when we talk about nuclear energy, because then what's the business case for nuclear energy on the continent if we don't industrialize our continent? And so that was the main. Now, when we talk about innovation, obviously we need to think in an innovative manner. Starting the day-to-day, we talked about the change of heart of the World Bank, and yes, it's a great thing. Yesterday, Mansour, during your panel, you said something very important, which is for projects that are so critical for our development, should we rely upon other people's money? Because other people, other institutions can have change of hearts. So innovation has to be us thinking really through who we are, where we want to be 10, 15 years down the road, and how to structure ourselves in order to use our own money to fund our dreams. And so I would say that's where we need to be innovative. What kind of new financing models should we put in place in order to make sure that not only today, but 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road, 15 years down the road, we have enough money to get where we want to go? Because when we talk about, for example, the UAE, that now 25% of their energy is provided by nuclear, they had a lot of money, and it was they had a long-term view of how to get there. And what is needed today and what is required from us Africans is to be able to stay the course, because we're talking about nuclear, and quite frankly, we're very excited to talk about nuclear, but it's going to happen in 10 years, in 15 years. So how do we stay the course?
How do we remain committed
exactly.
to that grand strategy?
To the cause. And fund it over time so that we don't run out of money 10 years, in 10 years, or we need to be able to fund it all the way. And so it requires partnership with industries that are going to be off-takers, but it requires to have real industrial policies so that there is stability in the relationship with these off-takers.
Fantastic. So let me conclude the panel with last question to you, Mansour, which is really about the stakeholder engagement. We have international organization here. We have, of course, national governments. We have the private sector. We have academia. Can you reflect a little bit about what you think are the best practices in stakeholder engagement? What are processes that might actually, in fact, lead to this grand strategy, vision that the minister was talking about?
Of course, vision and leadership is critical, because if you, as Minister Larsen has mentioned, you need to set the course for the next 10, 15, 20 years. So strong leadership and commitment to the project is important. But the other thing is important as well is ownership. I really believe in that this project cannot be outsourced to some other company, another entity to, hey, this place looks good, come and try to build it and you solve the problem. So taking really ownership over the course. When I say ownership, I mean in two elements. I also believe that Africa has a real opportunity today to actually take ownership over the technology as well. One of the conversations I've been missing over the last 2 days, in my personal opinion, is that why can our African companies, African governments not fund nuclear innovation that is fit for context? So it's not just about putting a power plant in their own country, but it's about exporting technology, nuclear technology of the future to other places as well. That also comes with human capital development as well. Then the big elephant in the room, of course, is the role between government, the private sector, and the financing community. And that needs to align properly. But unlike in a solar business where you can spread your risk over 10 places, right? And if one country goes down, another country performs better, you're sort of hedging your risk. In a nuclear power plant, you're really getting married very quickly, right? So, and the dating period is very short here, right? Before you get into it. So I think having this sort of conversations, building the foundations right, setting the rules of the game properly, and having the government's ownership. And I say that as a private sector operator. In this case, the thing that would give me comfort to invest in this sector would to see that the government really has taken ownership over the project. Whatever happens, the project will get delivered. And that is the comfort that investors, I think, need to be able to overcome it.
Fantastic. I want to close by saying I think these 2 days have given us a lot of enthusiasm for what is happening here in this continent. Yes, the challenges are great, but the impact could be extraordinary. And as Mansour said, Africa has turned out to be the most innovative continent, and so we can count on Africa to play a fundamental role in the next generation of nuclear power. Please join me in thanking this wonderful panel. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Honorable Paula, Honorable Sina, Mansour, and Giovanni. That was a wonderful conversation. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for being part of this very important conversation. A lot has come out of that. I want to give a special appreciation to their excellencies for honoring us with your presence this morning. Thank you so much. And Mr. Rafael Grossi for sharing your insights with us. And your leadership and continued guidance are invaluable as we chart the future of nuclear energy for sustainable development for our beautiful continent. Thank you once again. We have come to the end of this session. Ladies and gentlemen, please remain in your positions as we allow their excellencies to depart. Thank you so much. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for being part of this conversation.